really happy to be able to contribute to the Howe Library because this is a wonderful place for me and for my family. I have a son who is 8 years old, and we come all the time to check out books and just be around. So I'm really excited to be able to share my research and being able to contribute to the library. And so the main questions um, that are guiding my talk tonight are: how did Mexican artist Frida Kahlo attain the status of a global icon, resonating with diverse communities in Mexico and across the world? And why does her work continue to hold significance in the 21st century? I believe there are two possible answers to these interconnected questions. The first is that Kahlo invented herself as an icon through her creation of self-portraits that emphasize specific aspects of her life. These include her mestiza identity, mixed race ancestry, as the daughter of a German immigrant and a Mexican woman from Oaxaca, the chronic health problems she endured throughout her life following a bus accident in 1925, which left her with a broken spine, pelvis, and leg, her exploration of gender identity and her intense sexual life, including a tumultuous marriage to artist Diego Rivera and multiple affairs with other men and women, her communist beliefs and admiration for the working class, her lifestyle and sense of fashion inspired by the nationalist drive of the 1920s and 30s to reclaim indigenous arts as the bedrock of Mexican identity. All these aspects were incorporated into her self-portraits to construct the image of a disabled, gender non-conforming, proudly Mexican artist who deeply cared for marginalized communities. However, Kahlo's self-portraits and the genre of self-portrait in general should not be considered a transparent account of the artist's life. Self-portraits have historically served diverse functions such as assertion of social status or artistic skills, exploration of personal identity, role playing, and self fashioning. Kahlo primarily used the genre of self portrait as an exploratory and self fashioning tool, examining specific facets of her life in order to project a compelling image of herself, an image that continues to resonate with us today. The second part of the answer to the question of how Kahlo became a global icon is that she was constructed as one by art historians and critics decades after her death in 1954. During her lifetime, Kahlo had only two solo gallery shows, one in New York City and another in Mexico City, and her art was mostly known within specialized artistic circles. In fact, her artistic career was often overshadowed by Diego Rivera's rise as an internationally famous muralist. While she was a respected artist and had many admirers, Kahlo did not achieve massive international fame until the 1970s. During that decade, feminist art historians in Mexico and the US began critically examining how art historiography had silenced or erased the contributions of women artists, featuring almost exclusively male artists. Kahlo was among the figures reappraised in scholarly circles as part of a larger effort to rediscover overlooked women in art history. Hayden Herrera's biography of Frida Kahlo, published in 1993, was a major commercial success and played an important role in bringing Kahlo to a wider public attention. The biography later served as the basis of the 2002 Hollywood film Frida, starring Salma Hayek and directed by Julie Taymor, further fueling public fascination with Kahlo and solidifying her image as a global icon. In the last 2 decades, the commercial use of Kahlo's image on t-shirts, mugs, and countless other products has grown exponentially, giving rise to a global pop culture phenomenon dubbed Fridamania or Fridamania. Taken together, these two answers I just provided help explain the process of constructing Kahlo as a global icon. Since the 1970s, art critics and historians have analyzed Kahlo's complex self-examination and self-fashioning, emphasizing certain facets of her work while downplaying others. For example, it is well known that Kahlo was a committed communist and a member of the Communist Party during most of her life. Although she did not actively participate in the party's activities, there's no doubt communism played a vital role in shaping her political ideology alongside the nationalist ideas prevalent in post-revolutionary Mexico. However, Kahlo's communist convictions are often overlooked or minimized in most critical examinations of her art, in favor of themes more aligned with contemporary identity politics such as gender, sexuality, or disability. On the other hand, Kahlo's association with feminism has become a central component of her rise to global fame, even though she did not identify as a feminist and, in fact, had an ambiguous relationship with feminist activism during her lifetime. For instance, historical evidence showed that she did not participate in, or at most had only a tangential connection to the most prominent feminist organization in Mexico at the time, the Frente Único Pro Derechos de la Mujer, the Sole Front for Women's Rights. These organizations, like similar groups during the first wave of feminism, primarily advocated for women's suffrage and demanded political equality. As a communist, Kahlo likely viewed feminist activism as a bourgeois initiative that merely aspired to integrate women to the existing political system. It is plausible that Kahlo believed that feminism was not radical or revolutionary enough, as it did not aim to transform the political system as a whole. So while Kahlo herself may have identified more readily as a communist than as a feminist, it is undisputable that her work engages with concerns we now recognize as feminist. As art historian Lisa Tigner argues, quote, feminism is not necessarily a consciously determined ingredient of the work, but a product of the relation between the work and the representations of the dominant culture, a particular audience, and the uses to which it is put. As I will show next, Kahlo's work introduces topics and themes such as sexual violence that would become increasingly prominent during the second wave of feminism in the 70s and 80s. In other words, regardless of Kahlo's personal beliefs or intentions, her work pioneered an approach that resonated directly with feminist critics in the 1970s and has since become an essential part of progressive agendas in both Mexico and the United States. In this presentation, my aim is to provide an overview of the feminist readings of Kahlo's work, while also suggesting that her art continues to offer rich possibilities. After examining the feminist strategies employed in Kahlo's work, I will explore a topic that has received less scholarly attention but is equally relevant in today's world. Kahlo's vision of the interconnection between human beings, animals, plants, the planet, and the cosmos as a whole. Her images of a vital and deeply interconnected universe are especially significant in the context of ecological collapse and biodiversity loss driven by anthropogenic climate change. So I'll start first with a few readings of feminist readings of some of her most famous works. Lisa Tigner suggests that feminist artists since the 1970s have employed two fundamental strategies. The affirmative strategy focuses on emphasizing uniquely female experiences such as motherhood, miscarriage, and nursing. In an art history dominated by male artists, these experiences were systematically underrepresented, deemed unimportant, or not artistically relevant. When female experiences were depicted by men, they were portrayed exclusively through the male gaze. Frida Kahlo not only chose to depict these private, intimate experiences, but also did so with a level of symbolism and intensity that still astonishes us today. Employing a naive artistic style inspired by Mexican folk art, My Birth is a vividly explicit depiction of how Kahlo imagined her own birth. There's no indication in the painting suggesting a joyful or a fulfilling experience. Instead, it conveys a sense of trauma and horror, affecting even her mother, whose face is covered by a piece of fabric, and the religious figure silently witnessing the scene in the upper part. The sense of horror is further underscored by Kahlo's use of the Mexican folk art genre known as exvoto or retablo, which are small scale paintings offered in gratitude to religious figures for having saved someone from illness or accident. These votive paintings typically depicted in graphic detail the traumatic event in the upper section, this part, while a written narrative at the bottom explains the miracle. In Kahlo's works, however, the bottom section, this part, is often left blank, and there's no indication that a miracle has occurred. This has led scholars to suggest that Kahlo desacralizes the genre. This is a religious genre, offering no supernatural salvation. And this is actually pictures of Kahlo's own collection of ex-photos. She and Diego Rivera collected a lot of folk and popular art. And in her house in La Casa Azul in Coyoacán, which is now the Frida Kahlo Museum, you can still see her collection of ex-photos. Henry Ford Hospital is inspired by a miscarriage Kahlo suffered, one of several throughout her life, while she was in Detroit, where Rivera was painting murals at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Kahlo depicts herself lying in a hospital bed, bleeding and alone in the middle of a barren industrial landscape. The blood and isolation emphasize the pain and vulnerability she experienced due to her inability to have children. Several umbilical cords extend from her body. One connects her to a fetus, while another is attached to an anatomically correct pelvis, likely referencing the injuries that made childbirth impossible for her. Other umbilical cords connect to objects that are less clearly tied to her own biography and seem to carry symbolic rather than autobiographical meaning. A machine that appears menacing, a dead flower, likely symbolizing the damage to her reproductive organs, and a snail suggesting the unbearable uh, slowness of the experience. In Henry Ford Hospital and in other works, Frida Kahlo draws a close connection between infertility, specifically miscarriage, and industrial modernity. This association reflects her critical perspective on the US society, and industrial capitalism more broadly. She and Diego Rivera lived in the US for approximately 3 years. They were in San Francisco, then Detroit, and then New York City. Kahlo often portrays, in stark contrast, Kahlo often portrays a female experiences as deeply intertwined with nature. This is clearly evident in Mi Nana y Yo, My Nurse and I, which also employs the genre of ex-voto. You can see the left blank piece of paper here. Here, Kahlo depicts herself with the body of a child and the head of an adult being breastfed by a nude indigenous woman in a natural environment. Several elements emphasize the association between motherhood and nature. The woman's breast, nurturing Kahlo, is composed of white flowers, while the milk droplets resemble the white raindrops falling from the blue sky. By highlighting her physical connection to nature embodied by the indigenous woman, Kahlo foregrounds both her indigenous ancestry as a mestiza and her reliance on the all-encompassing nature. As Mary Coffey suggests, while the discourse of mestizaje or racial mixing was typically employed by male artists of the time to construct a masculinist national identity, Kahlo instead offers an embodied account of her own experience, one that emphasizes the active, nurturing roles of both femininity and indigeneity. In general, Kahlo's work presents female experiences as powerful and deeply connected to nature. These experiences are often traumatic or violent, while in other instances they are nurturing and life-sustaining. In this way, Kahlo's representations evoke both the creative and destructive forces of nature, which she saw as fundamentally opposed to the lifelessness and superficiality of industrial capitalism and modernity. By highlighting experiences traditionally associated with women, the affirmative strategy of feminist art presents femininity in clear contrast to masculinity, suggesting that the two genders are inherently and naturally different. In contrast, the deconstructive strategy emphasizes that gender roles are shaped by cultural and social discourses rather than by innate biological traits. Alongside her affirmative feminist works, Kahlo also engaged with this deconstructive approach by questioning how socially constructed gender roles shape ideas of femininity. This deconstructive strategy is evident in one of Kahlo's most famous self-portraits, Autorretrato con el pelo corto. We see an androgynous looking Kahlo staring defiantly at the viewer. She is wearing an oversized gray suit and a red shirt, along with earrings, heels, and makeup. While Kahlo's physical appearance already blurs the socially dominant roles of masculinity and femininity, this effect is heightened by the fact that she has just cut her hair short with a pair of scissors held in her hand. Hair is scattered across the floor in a defiant gesture that challenges the traditional association between long hair and femininity. This connection is further emphasized by the lyrics of a popular song written across the top of the painting. Look, if I loved you, it was because of your hair. Now that you are without hair, I don't love you anymore. Here, a masculine voice speaks to a lover who has recently cut her hair, suggesting that her worth and desirability depended on her adherence to conventional gender standards. Perhaps Kahlo herself, like many women, had heard similar words in response to her refusal to conform to social expectations. And we do know that in her real life, he used to sometimes dress as a man. He liked to play different gender roles. By including these lyrics, Kahlo exposes how popular culture and society more broadly reproduces and enforces limiting and oppressive norms surrounding women's physical appearance and behavior. The violent effects of socially accepted gender norms on women are powerfully illustrated in a lesser known work by Kahlo titled Unos cuantos piquetitos, a few small nips. Inspired by a true story, the painting depicts the brutal murder of a woman at the hands of her jealous boyfriend, who reportedly said in court, "But I only gave her a couple of small nips." The title serves as an ironic commentary, sharply contrasting with the horrific violence shown in the painting. Kahlo graphically portrays the woman's wounded body, emphasizing the brutality by covering the bed and even the edges of the painting with blood. This visceral imagery forces the viewer to confront the violence directly, demanding moral accountability for this senseless act of femicide. A term popularized in the 1970s by feminist theorists, femicide refers to, quote, a misogynistic killing of women by men motivated by hatred, contempt, pleasure, or a sense of ownership over women. End of quote. Kahlo's painting anticipates a feminist awareness that would only gain broader visibility during the second wave of feminism in the 1970s. That femicide is the most extreme yet deeply rooted outcome of patriarchal systems and traditional gender roles, systems that allow men to feel entitled to control women's bodies, appearances, and even their lives. In addition to addressing feminist concerns, Kahlo's work also reflects on the interdependence of human beings, biological life, the earth, and the cosmos more broadly. These images of the interconnectedness of all entities in the universe are especially resonant in our current era marked by the harmful effects of capitalist societies on the climate and biodiversity. Retrato de Luther Burbank is an excellent illustration of these ideas and a powerful reminder of the delicate ecological balance underpinning life on Earth. Likely because it is a portrait and not a self-portrait, this work has received less scholarly and public attention than Kahlo's most famous paintings. It portrays botanist and horticulturist Luther Burbank, who became renowned internationally during the first decades of the 20th century for creating hybrid trees, flowers, fruits, and other plants. In 1930, a few years after Burbank's death, Kahlo and Rivera visited his house and garden in California, in San Francisco, and learned about his life and work. Famously, Burbank had instructed that he be buried directly under a tree so that his decaying organic matter would nourish the plant. Both Kahlo and Rivera would go on to paint separate portraits of Burbank in 1931, which speaks of the interest and admiration they surely felt for him after visiting his garden. Yet, whereas Rivera's image of Burbank grafting a plant serves the function of emphasizing the technological expertise and natural resources of California, Kahlo's portrait is an exploration of a quote, cosmic framework of life and death that relies on surrealist imagery of Burbank's earth. In this painting, we see the renowned botanist portrayed as a human-plant hybrid. His human-like upper body is holding a philodendron, which is a species native to Mexico, while the lower part of his legs resembles a tree trunk whose roots reach and penetrate a realistically portrayed dead body underground. As scholars have argued, this portrait is alluding not only to Burbank's burial in his profession of plant hybridization, but probably also to his philosophical suggestions contained in his work, The Training of the Human Plant, which draw an analogy between plants and people on the basis of their shared dependence on environmental circumstances and hereditary factors. While the extent to which Kahlo was familiar with Burbank's theories is unknown, it is safe to say that she at least was aware of their general outlook and main propositions. In this line, scholars have suggested that Kahlo was captivated by Burbank's hybridization theories because they enable her to symbolize her own mixed Mexican and European identity, and more generally, the post-revolutionary construction of mestizaje, racial mixing, as the basis of the national identity. Additionally, by depicting a renowned American botanist holding a plant indigenous to Mexico, Kahlo was probably addressing her mixed emotions towards her own experiences living in the US as a proud Mexican, and maybe the prospect of a Pan-American cooperation. However, I would like to suggest that Kahlo's painting depicts hybridization not only as a biological process or a racial process, as a metaphor of a racial process, but also as a cosmic process. The portrait explores, quote, the interrelatedness of all life, particularly of plant and human life, suggesting that these two disparate forms of life are intimately connected and interdependent. Whereas human beings depend on the oxygen, food, and other products provided by vegetal life, certain varieties of plants owe their existence and proliferation to horticulturists such as Burbank. More broadly, by depicting a continuity between human and vegetal bodies, these portraits suggest that human beings and plants are two specific, essentially comparable variants of life. While this suggestion destabilizes the traditional biological hierarchy, man, animals, plants, inorganic matter, the portrait similarly puts pressure on the division between the living and the non-living, or the organic and the inorganic spheres, by depicting an underlying continuity between the two realms. So there's a continuity and interdependence between life and death, the organic and the inorganic. Thus, this work is not only a representation of death nurturing life, but also a suggestion that there's no essential distinction between the living and the inert. The two are particular manifestations of the unitary, universal flow of energy and matter. Furthermore, Retrato de Burbank provides a clear illustration of the notion of plants defined as cosmic mediators, that is, agents that because of their own physiology are bound to establish close relationships with the soil and the air, the earth, the geological, and the sun, the cosmological. Located at the center of the work, the image of the human-plant hybrid is in effect interconnecting the three zones of the landscape, cosmos, earth, and underground, clearly demarcated by distinct colors. The blue cosmos contains a few white and gray clouds whose shapes bear a significant resemblance to the large plant leaves to the left of the figure. Right here, here. The light brown earth holds two lush trees with hanging fruits, seemingly an allusion to Burbank's work of producing high-yielding plants. Lastly, the dark brown underground displays small root systems adjacent to the human plant hybrid's roots, drawing nourishment from the decaying corpse. Thus, the painting provides an image of a mixture taking place not only between humans and plants, but also between the cosmos and the earth, the organic and the inorganic. Depictions of human plant hybrids appear in several other works produced by Kahlo in the 1930s and 40s. One of the most significant is El Abrazo del Universo, La Tierra, México, Yo, Diego y el Señor Cholot, which similarly portrays entanglement and indistinction between the biological, plants, animals, humans, the geological, and the cosmological. Whereas Retrato, Portrait of Luther Burbank, employs a layered landscape composition, including a cross-section of the Earth, to address the interconnection of the universe. So here we see a cross-section of the Earth. El Abrazo, this painting incorporates a structure of concentric circles, which encompasses the diverse realms of the whole cosmos. In the outermost circle, right here, we see an anthropomorphization of the universe against a dark and bright background containing clouds and celestial bodies. The gigantic arms of the universe, one dark and one bright, are holding lush vegetation and a sleeping dog, as well as a green human plant earth whose lactating breast has a large crack and is nurturing a tree. Here's the tree. The earth is embracing a weeping Frida Kahlo, who in turn cradles a nude, childlike Diego Rivera in the innermost circle. Overall, while it includes marks of conflict introduced by the cracking breast and Kahlo's tears, the painting seems to suggest that the universe ultimately neutralizes these binary relations in a harmonious totality, just as it thrives against the dark and bright background. In the end, this work suggests an interdependent, loving relationship between each realm of the universe, which simultaneously embraces a dependent body and is being embraced by a higher being. El abrazo de amor is perhaps the best expression of what scholars call Kahlo's quote, vitalistic form of pantheism. Like other Mexican intellectuals of the time, Kahlo conceived of the universe as a unitary, immanent domain which comprises a plurality of processes and beings that, despite their differences and specificities, share an essential sameness. This cosmic uniformity is granted by the fact that every being and realm, both in the organic and the inorganic spheres, is animated by a sort of vitality that endows them with sentience, movement, and expressiveness. Throughout her work, Kahlo paid special attention and consideration to the traditionally overlooked life of vegetal beings, which feature notably in El Abrazo de Amor and other self-portraits, as well as in her still life paintings. Kahlo's approach to plant life often highlighted the identity between plants and humans and was associated with broader speculations about the nature of the cosmos. Kahlo believed that there was an intrinsic affinity and sympathy between all entities in the cosmos, despite or precisely because of the all pervasive binaries and antagonisms in nature. By the 1940s, Kahlo's work recurrently both portrayed her integrated into a massive undifferentiated web of being, as illustrated by her numerous self-portraits with monkeys. And she and Diego Rivera had several pets. They had monkeys. They had a very famous garden in her house in Coyoacan. And she kind of sacralized nature. She was always surrounded by animals and by pets and plants in her house. So in this talk, and this is the last paragraph, this talk I have explored two salient themes of Kahlo's work, feminism and cosmic vitality, that resonate powerfully with us today. On the one hand, there is her complex exploration of gender identity through both affirmative and deconstructive strategies. Kahlo used the genre of the self-portrait to examine and highlight intimate experiences of her life as a woman, but she also created self-portraits that allowed her to experiment and perform gender roles different from those traditionally assigned to women by society. She did this by incorporating stylistic elements of Mexican folk art, such as the naive style and the ex-photo format, which implicitly aligned her with the nationalist and populist cultural trends that emerged in the wake of the Mexican Revolution. On the other hand, Kahlo's work also depicted the vitality that animates and interconnects everything in the universe, from inorganic matter to plants, animals, human beings, and the cosmos as a whole. This vitalistic worldview is a crucial component of her work, although it is often downplayed in scholarly studies that emphasize her exploration of personal or national identity. In Kahlo's work, however, personal identity is closely intertwined with and at times undistinguishable from plants, animals, and the planet itself. These two themes, feminism and cosmic vitality, are just two ways in which Kahlo's work continues to speak to us and offer tools for critically examining our current world, which is still marked by the social reproduction of gender inequalities affecting women and the capitalist exploitation of nature, disturbing planetary ecological balance. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about her relationship with Shavella Vaga?
Could you repeat that?
Her relationship with the singer Shavella Vaga.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with.
I can put it in the top. It's Shavella Vaga.
Yes, please. I mean, she had close relationships with Mexican artists. She was as a wife of Diego Rivera. He was part of the intelligentsia of Mexican cultural uh, establishment, and she also had relationships with surrealist artists. Chavela Vargas. You mean Chavela Vargas? Yeah, Chavela is a Mexican popular singer. She she was there. This is a rumor. I'm not exactly sure if it's true, but she had a relationship with Chavela Vargas and with several other women artists in Mexico, including yeah, including Chavela Vargas. Yeah, she's a really really famous Mexican popular singer. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And she also, well, she was traveling in in New York City and presenting her work. He became uh, he, he was in contact with the surrealist movement. And, uh, André Breton, who was the founder of the movement, had a really close relationship with her as well. So she had a lot of affairs with artists and famously with Trotsky, the communist leader who was exiled in Mexico and stayed in Frida's and Diego Rivera's house. And she had a brief affair with him as well. So she was really openly sexually active with both men and women, which was, of course, really uncommon for the time. Right? She was a really trailblazer in that sense.
Might you know at what age she started painting?
Yeah, she started painting briefly after suffering this accident in 1925. So she was 1925, 1926. So, and she was born in 1907, I believe. So yeah, those were the first, some of the first paintings that she did. And she actually didn't consider herself a professional painter. And she said that she only painted when she felt like doing it. So it's funny that this artist that was kind of didn't take herself seriously in terms of her artistic abilities ended up being much more famous than her husband Diego Rivera, who during her lifetime was actually the most renowned of the two of them. But this artist that painted uh, her her intimate experiences and made her life the main subject of her work ended up having such a profound uh, influence in Mexico and in the world. So that's
How is she perceived today in the Mexican community?
she is perceived as an icon, as a national icon, and her work was proclaimed as a national patrimony. So uh, it's part of the culture. It's part of the political and national identity in Mexico. Her house in Coyoacán, where she was born and lived for most of her life, is now the Frida Kahlo Museum, and is visited by people from all around the world. And you can see like large lines every day that you pass by, and it has become a place that really draws a lot of people from all over the world. And in Mexico, I mean, it's almost like a goddess, like a figure that is admired by many, by most, we could say by all Mexicans. Yeah. So she's a really known figure. But interestingly enough, her work, we all know like the, the 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 most famous aspects of her life, the accident, the intense marriage to Diego Rivera, but her work is not so much commented or interpreted. So I think her life, the dramatic events of her life, have in a way obscured the importance of her work. So her life has become like so known for by anybody that I think we need to keep analyzing the work because it's so important, it's so rich in possibilities, right? So so yeah, I think this, I mean, the work, it has obviously an autobiographical component, all of her work, but her work cannot be reduced to this autobiographical aspect. So it is an artistic construction that, in a way, goes beyond her life and uses her life as a pretext to reflect upon themes and topics that are way larger than her own life. So even though, of course, self-portrait is the genre that is most used by Frida Kahlo, she uses herself in order to explore topics like gender identity, uh, mestizaje, national identity, even these cosmic ideas that are larger, that are way more larger than her own life, right?
I might mention we've been to her house in
Oh yeah,
Quintana. And
did you like it?
quite a memory, yeah. I think it was Casa de Azul.
That's Azul, huh?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Sí, it's a really nice place. And in her house, you can see, of course, the famous garden where she kept all these different kinds of pets. Then you can see the collection, her collections of folk art, not only exposed, but also uh, artesanías, like small figures and pre-Hispanic figures as well. And you can really get a sense of all the cultural trends of the time, of the Mexican post-revolutionary time, where there was um, a desire to reappraise popular and indigenous cultures and make them the center of the Mexican identity. So she really believed and was one of the major proponents of considering rediscovering art, indigenous and popular art, and that's why she had these large collections, right, that she kept in her house. So being in her house is a good way of kind of becoming familiarized with all these bigger, larger cultural trends that were informing her work and her approach to art, right?
Where are all the original artwork? They're not all in the Casa Azul.
Yeah, the real paintings. Yeah, actually, in the Casa Azul, there's only a few of them.
Where are the
But
rest?
the rest, most of them, are in a Dolores Olmedo museum. Dolores Olmedo was a friend of Frida Kahlo, who collected, who bought her art, and most a lot of their her self portraits, almost as a kind of a as a little activity, just kind of a hobby, collecting some of the works. And then, of course, this collection became valuable, like super valuable. And she made a, a museum, the Dolores Olmedo Museum, where most of the paintings of Frida Kahlo are still kept. There are a few paintings as well. They have self-portrait with this cropped hair. That one is in the MoMA Museum in New York City. There's one self-portrait in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and a few others in a few other places. But most of them are in the Dolores Olmedo Museum in Mexico City. Mhm.
I'm curious, do you see a connection between these two strands in our art, between the feminism and the vitalism? And also, was there a prior tradition of vitalism in Mexican culture that she was drawing upon with that, or was she really breaking new ground with that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's definitely a connection in the sense of um, of theorizing nature and the universe as a force and as a really nurturing and interconnected realm. So both in the feminist and this affirmative feminist works, where you can see nature as a nurturing and as a really uh, connected force that connects nature and humans, and also in her this cosmic um, works of art, where you can see all the realms that are really interconnected and almost indistinguishable. So I think there's a connection between them. And in terms of the vitalism in Mexico, um, there wasn't. I mean, there was a few philosophers like Jose Vasconcelos, who was a famous writer in Mexico at the time, who also had these theories about the universe and kind of the cosmic they created a cosmic framework to think about life. But previously, there wasn't much a tradition before them. They actually draw from, some of them draw from Henri Bergson's vitalism, a philosopher, a French philosopher who had a vitalistic philosophy that was really influential at the time. And some of them also were influenced by the Russian cosmism, which is other trend of cosmism, these thinkers that had really utopian and after the Russian Revolution, they had a utopian view of the cosmos as well. So the Russian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution were like two hotspots of this kind of radical thinking, utopian thinking. And Frida Kahlo was, of course, drew from all these these places. Yeah.
Thank you.